Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. Good afternoon. I am Erin Pollard, the Project Officer for ERIC in the U.S. Department of Education, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar. Today, we're going to take a tour of the ERIC record. We're going to delve into the fields and provide background information about how they're populated, how you can most effectively use the fields and find what you are looking for in ERIC, and how some fields, like the identifiers, have changed in recent years. Understanding how the fields support your research can enhance your experience with ERIC. Before we get started, I have just a couple housekeeping items. First, we muted everyone to reduce the background noise during our presentation. If you have a question, please enter into the chat box on the side of your screen. We will work to answer into our presentation or address it at the end during our Q&A session. Also, we are recording the webinar and it will be available for viewing on the ERIC YouTube channel in a few weeks. You'll be getting an email to let you know when it's online. We are also closed captioning the presentation. If you want to turn off the captioning, please click the X by the media viewer. Today you're going to hear from two members of the ERIC team, starting with me. I am the Project Officer for ERIC in the Institute of Education Sciences, or IES, which is part of the U.S. Department of Education. I'll provide the introduction and the wrap-up. ERIC operates under contract with AEM. AEM is tasked with finding 4,000 records of education research each month that meet our selection policy and then creating records for each piece. They then send these records to IES to add to our website. Judy Beck, our processing team lead, will take us through the ERIC record fields and provide an in-depth look about how they capture the essential information about the content and offer value-added data to augment your understanding of the content. Then we will answer any questions that you may have. Bibliographic records are the foundation of ERIC. Information in each record supports search and retrieval and helps you see if the content you found is a good match for your work. This graphic shows the basic structure of an ERIC record. There are 3 sets of fields arranged at the top left, top right, and lower portion of the record. The fields describe the content, help you retrieve and select material, and provide links to external resources for additional information. Understanding how the fields support your research can enhance your experience with ERIC. For example, ERIC links to the IES website, where you can find additional information about IES publications, IES grant and contract funding, and studies reviewed by the What Works Clearinghouse. Now I'd like to introduce Judy Beck, who will be our tour guide.
Thank you, Erin, and hello, everyone. The ERIC record has 33 fields, and today we're going to jump around in them a little. We'll look at what data is in each field, explore the relationship of some fields to others, and reach outside the actual record at times to discover more information. But before we get started, let me say a few words about searching in ERIC and the data fields. Not all of the fields in ERIC are searchable. ERIC prioritizes the title, author, source name, abstract, and descriptor fields because those are the ones that contain the most information or the information that most researchers seek. If all the fields were searchable, your results would come back with a lot of irrelevant material. There are other fields that are searchable, such as the ISSN number or the ERIC number. Those are typically used only when searching to find a very specific item. We'll talk about some additional search options when we get to our last group of fields. As Erin said, first we'll look at the various fields that provide a description of the content. Then we'll move to the fields that help give you access to the full content, or the full text. Third, we'll identify the fields that act to refine further searches that you may do. And the last fields we look at will show the newer fields tied to IES resources. We're going to go live to ERIC to do our tour, and I'm going to pull up a record to get us started. Hard sometimes to type and talk at the same time, so bear with me for a second here. And here we go. Let's start our tour over here with the ERIC number. You can see I'm circling it. The ERIC number is unique to every record. and it's either going to have an ED prefix, as this one does, or it may have an EJ prefix, as this record does. The EJ or the ED broadly identifies the content as being from an ERIC journal, EJ, or an ERIC document, ED. Records with the ED prefix are non-journal or gray literature materials. This field is searchable. You saw me type in a number and retrieve a specific record. The unique ERIC number is the key element in the permanent URL for each ERIC record. You may need to include it in a citation that you might be writing. Right? But this number and the prefix correlates to the field right below it, record type. Record type spells out it's either non-journal, as in this record, or, going back to the EJ, journal. The non-journal is for anything that is not a journal. This could include conference papers or books, research reports, things like that. So the record type matches up with the record prefix. One thing that you might want to note, all materials that are received through the online submission system are given an ED number and the record type of non-journal. Now, let's take a look again at record type and go to publication type down here. What's the difference between these two? Well, record type, as we saw, is either or. It's either journal or non-journal. But if you go down here to publication type, you'll see that this can help you pinpoint better the sort of resource you're viewing. We can include up to 3 different entries to describe the resource. Looking at this record, we can see it's a non-journal record, but it's also a research report and includes numerical or quantitative data. On the other hand, if we go back to the journal record, we can see that journal article is the first publication type mentioned. All journal records have this. But this is also an information analysis, and it deals with a research report as well. So ERIC uses a standardized list of publication types that you'll find in this field, and it can cover a large array of possibilities, anything from bibliographies to literature reviews or to speeches. Now, let's go back up to the top of the record to the biggest, boldest field, which is the title of the resource. This format will always include the main title, any subtitle, a series name, and a report number if applicable, such as this record from a regional educational laboratory. You can see the REL number is included as part of the title field. This is a searchable field, so you can search on report number if you need to. Underneath the title field, we have the author of the piece. Now, ERIC, at this point, as a digital resource, includes every author on a piece. We don't use et al. Or and others, as was the case when ERIC was print-based and they had to save space. The format is always last name first, and there are no honorifics used in the ERIC author field, so it won't say comma PhD or anything like that. However, the record will designate if someone is an editor or a compiler as opposed to an author. The names are included in this field as they're presented on the content. Now, this field is also searchable. Be sure to consider, though, that an author's name may appear differently on different works. Some will use their full name, others may only use an initial. So if you're doing an author search, and we're going to go back here, you will see on the side panels for search limiter, there is one for author. If we had done a full-blown search, there would be many author names here, and an author may appear more than once as full name and once with initials. However, there's a nice feature in ERIC now, which is if you see an author name, such as you see here, we have two authors, both of these author names appear as links. If this happens, you can click on the author name, and you'll see that you go outside of the ERIC record to a third-party provider that links to, in this case, it's ORCID is the provider, that links to a BioSketch page, which also includes a list of additional works by this same author. This can be really helpful in discerning authors who may have more common names, and you want to make sure you're looking at the person you actually want to look at. Today in ERIC, there are about 5,000 instances of author IDs, most, if not all, linked to ORCID, and we have more and more authors who are using this feature, and that's going into ERIC every day. We can also accommodate links to other author ID providers, such as ScienceCV, NSF Fastlane, or ERA Commons. Now, sometimes we get requests from users for author contact information. We don't maintain this information, but sometimes on these author ID pages there will be an email address or a web page address that you can use, or sometimes you will find contact information for the corresponding author of a piece on the full text if it is available. Now, underneath the author, the next field we're looking at is the source name field. For journal articles, such as this one, the source name is the journal name in which the article is published. For non-journal materials, I'll get that one back, you'll see that it's the organization or institution that authorized the submission of the document to ERIC. Now, the source name field is also searchable. Let's go back for a minute. I told you we would jump around. Let's go back to this journal record, and you'll see that following the source name is the rest of the citation information. For journal articles, this field can include the volume number, issue number, the page range, an article number, a publication month, a publication season, and the year, whichever elements that particular journal uses. For non-journal materials, the field might capture conference presentation details if that's applicable. Now, across from this field is the publication date field. And this is the field, it's the date that's shown on the document, the article, or the publisher's website. This field will always show a year. It may or may not show a month or any other information. This is also the date that will appear in your search results. You go back here, if there were many items listed here, you would see, you can check out what the date is from that field. Let's see, where are we now? We want to go back to here. All right. So, if there's a citation field and a publication date with a year, they better match. That's what they're supposed to do. Okay. Occasionally, there's no publication date available on the content or even on a website. So in this case, our processors use the year in which the content is processed. And in terms of this, these fields, only the year is searchable for the field. All right, let's go to what is sometimes the largest field, and that is the abstract. So to assess whether or not the content you found is on target for your research, the abstract field can offer the most significant information. The abstract is a narrative summary of the work. It often outlines the research questions, the population studied, maybe the methods used, results, and conclusions. However, not all abstracts are equal in detail or approach, but all abstracts are searchable. So the abstract field and the title field are the fields that are going to give you your results from keyword searches. Now, across from the abstract, you'll see the abstractor field. There are two entries for this field. You can tell where an abstract originated by looking at that field. If it says as provided, as this one does, it means the abstract came from the author or the publisher. If, however, let's go back to this record and look at the abstractor, it says Eric. That designation is used when no abstract was provided and Eric's staff had to write one, or if there had to be significant information added to a publisher as provided abstract. Okay, the rest of the fields that describe the record content are fairly straightforward. We'll use the journal record to show these. Pages. This one says 20. It tells you how long the content is. And for a journal article, it should match the page range that was in the citation field up here. If there is no entry or an NA or a 0 in this field, it means that the information wasn't available at the time of processing. Reference count, right here, gives you the number of references that were cited in the document or the article. If this field contains a 0 or an NA, the material has no references, or the author may have used another form to present citations, such as footnotes, endnotes, or a bibliography list in place of a reference list. It's also possible the information wasn't available at the time the content was processed. Now, below the reference count, we will have the ISBN, if there is an International Standard Book Number, or, in this case, an ISSN number, the International Standard Serial Number. These are assigned by the publishers to the content. You'll find them here. Sometimes it's the print ISSN, and depending on the content, it could be the E or electronic ISSN number. Now we're going to switch over here to the bottom and go to the language field. This field always defaults to English because ERIC is an English language database. Additional languages are only indicated if they were provided in addition to the English content, such as sometimes there is a side-by-side translation that appears. The ERIC selection policy specifies that English presented in materials must conform to standards of English grammar and to standards of understandability for any reader. The next two fields we're going to look at sometimes can be confusing. They're down at the bottom. And the first one is sponsor, right down here. If the sponsor field is populated, it means that that entity provided financial support for development of the non-journal resource. Entries in this field might include foundations, such as with this record, the foundation, Annie E. Casey Foundation. Could be government agencies that funded but did not write the content, or other organizations. Below the sponsor field is authoring institution. This is the name of the organization that's responsible for the intellectual content of the resource. This field is only used for non-journal content records, and there are times when the authoring institution and the source name are the same. As you can see in this record, MDRC is mentioned in both places. But if there were multiple institutions involved in creating the source, the other institutions will be mentioned in this field. So you can see with our REL record, Regional Educational Laboratory, but we also have NCEE and the Southwest Educational Development Laboratory as authoring institutions as well. Now, let's go back to the top of the record and see if this content is peer-reviewed. We're looking in the blue box now. If the content is peer-reviewed, the icon, an open book with a check and the words peer-reviewed will appear on the record. You can see it here for the REL record. And we'll take a look at this record in the blue box, and you see it doesn't appear in this record. ERIC accepts blind or expert peer review processes and only assigns the indicator if the source has a documented process, whether it's from a journal or a non-journal source. There are currently about 925,000 peer-reviewed items in ERIC, with more going in all the time. And just a quick mention, if you only want to see peer-reviewed results in your searches, you can check the peer-reviewed only box right under this search box. All right. The 18 fields we just looked at basically describe the content represented by the ERIC record through the metadata. Now let's take a look at 3 fields that can help you actually access the content. The symbol everybody wants to see in their search results is the PDF icon indicating full text download is immediately available. There are currently about 391,000 full text items available in ERIC, and more go in every day. If you only want to see full text available items, again, in a search, you can click the full text available on ERIC box to limit your searches to that. The ERIC content development efforts focus on bringing in as much full text as possible, as well as peer-reviewed materials. It's good to know that ERIC can only immediately display the full text if the publisher of the content permits it as part of the formal agreement with ERIC. Now, a number of publishers allow the full text to display after an embargo period. So it's possible that something that's not full text available today might be available 6 months, a year, or even up to 5 years from now. Grantee submissions are all under a 12-month embargo period from the publication or completion date of that content. However, if full text cannot be displayed, the record will show an icon and the words direct link. If you click on that link, you'll see that the link takes you outside of the record to the publisher's website, where you can find the resource. Sometimes the publisher has the full text available for free on its website, or the full text may be available for purchase. You may have noticed that the link in this record was a DOI, or Digital Object Identifier. We try to use DOIs as much as possible because they should never lapse and they should transfer with the piece of content even if the provider changes. However, not every publisher uses DOIs, and so we try to use a link that will get the searcher as close to the content as possible. Now, you know and I know that publishers redo websites. Sometimes the sources change publishers, and the original URL no longer resolves or works. This is frustrating for everyone, and ERIC does fix broken links as time allows. Now, the third field we want to look at is underneath the descriptor field, and this is the publisher information field. In instances where the direct link isn't working, you can look at the publisher information field. It contains contact information for the publisher, including web addresses, sometimes an email. You may be able to get to the overall publisher website that way and find out how to access the full text. So there's 3 fields to help you get to full text. So at this point in our tour, we've looked at the fields that describe the content and the fields that can help gain access to it. There are 6 fields that you can use to refine your searches and perhaps discover even more content that fits your research needs. The first one are the descriptors, field right below the abstract. Descriptors are assigned from the ERIC Thesaurus. That's a controlled vocabulary of education-focused terms. And when descriptors are used in searching ERIC, they can target your results more precisely. They capture the main subjects or the concepts in the content, and they can be used in new searches or as limiters for a current search, again, by going to the side panel on your results page, and you'll see a list of all the descriptors used in all the different fields, or in the different hits for your search. One thing that you may want to do is look at one of the newest videos that have been produced, which is called Finding the Right Descriptors for Your Search. And it can be viewed from the multimedia page on the ERIC website, and we'll actually take a look at that page in a little bit. All right, let's go back, because along with the descriptors, there's another field down at the bottom. These are the identifiers. These are proper nouns that appear in 3 fields and can be highly useful for targeting your search. Identifiers are only present in the record if the items were specifically mentioned in the resource's text. The 3 fields are locations, laws, policies, and programs, and assessments and surveys. This is an example of location identifiers. They're also a type of controlled vocabulary, and each time a specific one appears, it's formatted in the same way. So again, if you have a full page or more of search results, you can go over here to the side panels, and you'll see the 3 fields: the location, laws, policies, and programs, assessments, and surveys, and you can use these identifiers to further refine your searches. Just on kind of a historical note, the identifier field used to be a real mishmash of things. It was used to capture all sorts of items. And when ERIC went digital, the three categories that were approved by the department were retained, and only those identifiers falling into those three categories were kept as identifiers. Recently, the category names were updated to the fields that we're using today, and the identifiers were edited to consolidate or streamline the terms. Now, there are two more fields that can help you refine searches. Oops. Let me get the right record here. The first one, again towards the bottom, is education level. You can see here in this record we've got secondary education, higher education, post-secondary education. Terms will appear in this field only if they're specifically identified in the content. We do not infer any education levels when processing a record. If the content is discussing a level from an international context, such as from British schools, the education level is translated into the American equivalent. Also, the audience field, right up here above language, tells you who the content was intended expressly for. This information only appears if it's specifically identified in the content. So you can see with this record, we have teachers and researchers. Now we're going to come to the last group of fields, which is probably good because I have a frog in my throat. These are the fields that were the most recently added to the ERIC records. They provide connections between ERIC content and IES resources. And lastly, there are some fields that IES has added for internal reporting, like IES funded and the What Works Clearinghouse reviewed fields. These fields are also searchable, but you have to use a specific search string to see the results. If you go up to the Advanced Search Tips link and click on that, you'll get some additional information about how the ERIC search works, list of the searchable field names, but it will also tell you how to find a number of the items we're going to be talking about in just a moment. So let's look at the first one that we want to discuss, and that is IES funded. And you'll see that record, you'll see that field right here. IES funded, yes. This identifies content that's been developed through support from an IES grant or contract. And if you wanted to find all such content in ERIC, you could check the Advanced Search Tips page, type in funded:Y for yes in the search box, and you would retrieve all of that information. We also have the grant or contract number from any federal funding that went into funding the research that is represented in the ERIC record. Because this field can include any federal funding, you want to check the IES funded yes to see if that's there, to see if IES was a funder along with any other agencies. The IES publication field, again, down at the bottom, is a link that'll link to the publication page, which is, again, outside the ERIC record, and it will go to the appropriate regional ed laboratory or the National Center for Education Statistics or any other IES program page for additional details. Now we want to look at What Works Clearinghouse links. Again, we'll go towards the bottom of the record. And we have What Works Clearinghouse reviewed. This field will display the rating that What Works Clearinghouse gave to this particular study. Ratings can be meets evidence standards without reservations, as this one is, can be meets evidence standards with reservations, or does not meet evidence standards. This field only appears on the record if the study's been reviewed by the What Works Clearinghouse. And the What Works Study Page field goes to a page that contains full details, as you can see in a moment. Here we go. About the study, which can include the study findings and sample characteristics. You might want to take a look at another video on the multimedia page, which is titled, How Do You Use the What Works Clearinghouse Links in ERIC Records? And again, as I said before, you can check the advanced search tips section of the ERIC website to find out how to, build those searches. All right, we have one last field to look at. That is IES cited. This is for materials that have been referenced in IES reports. So if the journal article or the non-journal material has appeared in the reference list of an IES report, this field will be populated with the ERIC number of that IES report. And if you wanted to get a list of all the materials in ERIC that were cited in this particular report, you can take that number and go ahead and pop it in the search box, do a search, and you'll find the actual IES report and all the other materials that it cites that appears in ERIC. So, that brings us to the end of our Magical Mystery ERIC Record Tour, and I'm going to turn things back over to Erin for a wrap-up and any questions.
Thanks, Judy. In summary, you can see that an ERIC record provides valuable information to help you locate, evaluate, and make use of each article or document. If you're interested in finding out more, we have several videos and infographics that provide in-depth information about how to use specific fields. These products are all available on our very recently redesigned multimedia page that you can see here. Most of the products related to ERIC fields can be found in the Searching ERIC area. And here you can see the videos, infographics that are related to descriptors and identifiers and how to use links to external websites like author bio sketch pages, the What Works Clearinghouse, and other web pages. There is one product that will be soon released, or actually is up there now. It went live in the last, since we've been on the webinar, so I'm happy it's there. And so what this is called the Guide to an ERIC Record. This guide shows a sample record that includes all 33 ERIC fields that Judy just talked about. You can see that there is an icon beside each field that will link you to the field definition. And this is a helpful reference piece for understanding the field and for sharing with students and others who use ERIC for research to try to get the information that we gave in this webinar in a handy-dandy 4-page document. So with that, we're going to take any questions that you have, and please use the chat box on the side of the screen to type in any questions. And it looks like we got our first question. And this is a question for me. Are all IES-funded reports in ERIC? And so the answer to this is IES funds reports through 2 ways, through our contracts and through our grants. If they're published by a contract, it's going to be published by IES. IES is going to be the publisher. All of those are in ERIC. We've been operating since 2002. ERIC has been operating since way before then. All of IES published reports are in ERIC. For work that is funded by grants, that IES funds but are not published by IES, anything after 2012 that was funded after 2012 will be in ERIC as a grantee submission. This is part of our IES public access policy that you can learn more about through some videos that we have on our multimedia page. And for work that was done before, that was funded before 2012, it is just, it depends on whether or not it was published in a source that IES funded. Okay, so next question is, if full text is available in an institutional repository from a university, would ERIC ever link to that? And I'm going to punt to Judy, but before I do, everything in ERIC is under an agreement with a publisher. So if it depends on whether or not we get permission from the publisher, in this case an institutional repository, they probably aren't the copyright holder. So we have to get permission to do that. And so Judy, is there anything you would like to add there?
No, Erin, I think you covered that pretty well. We've had instances like this, and there is the copyright question that's first and foremost with this. So it really depends on if there's an agreement with the university hosting the repository and what are the conditions of the items that go into that repository.
Great. Yes. And I mean, a lot of this just depends on what it is. And sometimes we're able to do direct links to the institutional repository, sometimes not, depending on the nature of what types of materials it is. What percentage of your content is considered gray literature? And so this is something that, Judy, do you know offhand while I am doing a quick check?
I'm going to say roughly around 25%.
Yep, and to give you exact numbers, it looks like 25% is on average, but we have some months it's more, some months and less. In February, it was 19.52%, but that in the summer you'll see more because less journals are published. So typically we aim to get a nice variety of material. All right, let's see, any other questions? Okay, I saw a field that was called PDF pending restoration in ERIC. What does this mean? Can I get the full text of the record? And so we have several webinars on this topic that I would encourage you to check out. And what this field is it indicates that the full text document used to be available in ERIC, but it's no longer available. And it was either withdrawn because there was some personally identifiable information, which I encourage you to check out the old webinars to find out more than you ever want to know about how research has changed and privacy has changed in the past 50 years, or because it contains unreadable text, which means that you would get these pages that would be digitized but blank, so not particularly useful. And for a whole bunch of reasons, we had to take those down, and we are now digitizing them. But digitizing them is expensive and time-consuming. and tedious. If you watch the webinars, you can see that this is not a fun process. And so ERIC is trying to balance restoring these documents with limited resources. We don't want to say, hey, we're going to just stop indexing new records for 5 years to get all these old PDFs back. Instead, we're doing a piecemeal approach. So we will get everything back that we have copyright permission for. It just won't be instantaneous. Next question. I was wondering if ERIC has run into predatory journals getting indexed in ERIC and how ERIC is dealing with that. Well, so what I would encourage you to do is to check out our selection policy, and you can find that in the footer of the ERIC record or on any ERIC search. And when you click on the selection policy and you look at the PDF, it will talk about our policy with predatory journals and what our policy is about reviewing journals to make sure that what we have is not predatory, but it's also fair. So I encourage you to check that out. That was updated this January, and all the information is there. And let me try to pull up where in the PDF it is. Judy, do you know offhand?
Here's the selection standard and criteria. Talks about our agreement. Publisher and editorial procedures. Sponsorship. Yeah.
So it's in there. This is one of the big updates that we did in 2018. And so, yes. All right. If you look on page under criteria and publisher, criteria : publisher and editorial processes, it is on page 4. If you go up. Okay. So what it says is that we do look for adherence to ethical guidelines and fidelity to editorial conventions. And this is something that we're thinking a lot about. And we also covered this in our source selection webinar that is on our multimedia page. And you can get a lot more information about how we actually apply this standard in that webinar. All right. Do we have any other questions? Looks like we have just one more, and there might be some more coming in as I read this one. But can you search for materials in Spanish using the language field? And the answer is no. The language field isn't searchable. And also, ERIC only indexes materials in English or with the full English translation. So you're not going to find a lot of Spanish materials. There'll be some, mainly historical materials, some materials with full language translations, but you're not going to find a lot of them, so we haven't made that searchable. And with that, are there any more questions? Okay, I think we are all set. So this webinar will be posted on the multimedia page in probably mid-June. You will get an email that it's on our YouTube page before then. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at the ERIC Help Desk or via ERIC requests at ed.gov. Thank you, guys. Goodbye.